Okay, so my buddy Donnie had a surprise for me, and I was hoping it was half the size of this, but it was a 500 two-stroke, which a lot of guys say are really cool, and they are cool for a nostalgia factor. And you can see this thing kind of brings back some good memories of Jeff Ward, LaRocco, Kudrowski, those guys all racing this thing, and I do remember this, and even Danny Hamill off in the desert. These things were cool. Ty Davis was rad on these things, and these were cool bikes. They were rad, but they're gnarly beasts, so I was a bit surprised. Hey, Jay here. We're at one of our latest project bikes, and this time we're going to kind of give you a walk through the process a little bit. I'm not good about doing that because I just like to get stuff done. This is a 91 KX500. Now, I'm always saying guys should ride 250Fs and 350s, smaller bikes. This KX500 is going to be a fun project. I don't know how much it's actually going to end up getting ridden. My buddy Donnie bought this bike. It originally was a California bike, made its way back to Michigan. Long story. When Donnie was back there this summer for Redbud, him and Grant Langston found a guy that had this thing, and it's all original. I mean, it has the stock bars on here. We think even the tires might be stock. It has the stock green steel bars on here. So this thing is really updated. This little works connection piece is one of the few aftermarket pieces we could find. These bikes were really cool back in 91, 92. Danny Hamill was like the king of the Baja and desert on these things. And it was just awesome watching him ride. I saw him ride these things a few times. I saw Ty Davis racing these things at Mammoth. It was just amazing. They're so cool, just raw. I could never ride one. I putted one around a few times and it was enough. You know, I think a 450 scares me. This is that same type of thing, but with added huge vibration. We're going to try to address some of that when we build this thing. So, LaRocco, Kudrowski, the guys riding these things, and even Emig at Donations, these things were really cool. Now, so what we've done is we've hooked up with KX Guru. We worked with him on a build for Sonny Garcia, and this build he did with Sonny Garcia came out amazing. Now we're not going to go to that extent because we don't have that kind of budget on this build to get the tie gas tank and a bunch of the pieces they did, but we're going to do a lot of it and try to keep this build in a reasonable cost, keep it under what a new bike would cost. You guys are going to laugh, but yeah, we're going to try to keep it under that and just do this thing amazing. So we're going to tear this thing down right now. You know, drain the oil, the water, throw away any of the junky stuff, and I'm gonna lay everything out and talk about what we're gonna do. These guys at KX Guru have some good tips for us, and they're gonna show us, they're helping us with some of the stuff that we're gonna get done. And once I have everything tore down, I'll show you what we're gonna do throughout this process. We're gonna get the engine addressed, get the frame addressed, all those types of things, and so we'll get all that going. So probably in an hour, I'll be back here talking about this thing all apart. Go. Okay, so when you're tearing down a bike, one of the first things we like to do, of course, is drain the coolant and oil and just try to get it all out. The more you get out, the better, because this is all going to be for your, when you take the engine apart, it's all going to be in your way. And we're actually draining the brakes as well. We just get all the fluid out of the brakes just because, and that's one less thing to deal with. So I like to get all the fluids out of the bike, and it's nice to kind of leave the bike, wheels on and so forth as long as you can while you're stripping it down so that it kind of stays stable. And you're working on it on a stand. We like to kind of get everything off, like completely, because a lot of times you take it apart and you get like, oh, 3/4 the stuff's off. See, we got the handlebars off here. We'll try to really make sure we get everything completely off. And so that way we can really assess all the parts. And while we're working on this thing, we're looking for parts that are missing. That's really important. So when we're tearing down a bike, you want to see if what parts are broken or missing, because when you go put it back together, sometimes it's months later and you totally forgot. So I like to make a little list while I'm tearing it down and of all these parts that were broken or missing and so forth. Here we got kind of two more beginner guy mechanics here, and we're just supervising, keeping them going while we're doing other stuff. When you're tearing down a bike, typically there's not a lot you can really jack up, but we give them some direction on what to do, and that's the way we go for it. So one or two guys, two guys is nice because you have one guy on each side of the bike to be able to, hold the nuts and so forth, and, help with all that when you're pulling out the engine bolts and so forth. So I think both these guys, one of them is their first time. It's his first time, not Spencer's, but the other guy's probably his first time pulling an engine out. So he got to learn a lot, which is kind of cool. This is a good experience for him to be able to learn and kind of see how it works and getting it apart. Obviously, getting it back together takes a whole lot longer. But the big thing is looking for things that are wrong or broken while you're doing it, and assessing everything and seeing what needs to be cleaned up. And if you get everything completely apart, linkage all the way apart, if you get all those things apart, then you can make a good assessment of what you need to get. This bike's going to get a lot of trick parts, as we've talked about, so some of the parts aren't even going to be used, but in some cases they will. See, I come in there just for little bits to give them a little bit of guidance, but not too much, and kind of bug them with a bike riding in and out of there. So kind of gives you a good idea of what it takes to take one apart. I think these guys got about an hour or so, hour and a half. I don't know. We're watching it so fast, I can't remember. But if you take your time, hour and a half, you can get it apart really nicely. Yes, it can be done faster, of course, but to get it apart nicely to where everything's off the frame, races out of the frame. We want everything, foot pegs, everything off the frame, so that we're going to get work done to this frame, so we want everything off. And so that goes for the linkage and swing arm. Everything needs to be stripped completely down, completely out of the frame. So pretty easy deal, and this is what we got going on this one so far. As you can see, it's kind of a fun deal taking them apart, a lot more work putting them back together. Okay, so the easy stuff is over. Got it all here. Now it's all hard work, and we can actually begin on this build. There's a lot to do. It's a bit overwhelming. Not for Donnie, it's a little bit more overwhelming for me. So there's a lot to do. Luckily, we've got some good help with the KX Guru guys. Oscar and his buddies are going to help us get some stuff lined out. But these things, there's a ton of work to do. So I'm going to talk a little about what we're going to do, and some of that right now. We'll have this engine torn apart here in just a little bit, and decide how we're going to clean the cases, what we're going to do on the crank and piston, and make sure the cylinder's in good shape. We're going to have Tom Morgan go through the cylinder and head for us, and he helps set that up. And we even got a access for the cover here. We'll put a KX450 Henson cover on here. We got a lot we're going to do, so we're going to talk about that right now. So the first thing is the frame. The frame on these didn't last forever. They're what they are. So Raptor, they made a cool kit that you can actually weld on these mounts, and Oscar's going to do this for us. At the same time, they have a gusseting kit to gusset this frame up to make it stronger, to really last for a good use. Luckily, this bike that we started with was in really good shape. It wasn't beat. There's no cracks in the frame. It wasn't raced, a ton. You could tell. So it wasn't all beat up. So that's a cool thing. So we're going to have a really cool foot peg platform with modern KX450 size, oversized pegs, tie pegs with the steel mounts welded into the frame, all done legit. So we're going to do all that framework before we get it powder coated. So we're going to get the frame gusseted up. We're going to get the foot pegs mounted. We're also going to see if we bought a skid plate. We haven't got that planned yet. We're going to see about a skid plate and getting it mounts, tabs put in the frame at the same time. That'll make it a lot nicer to do it that way. So we're going to look at doing that. So I mentioned the engine. We're going to get that tore apart and assess it. Swing arm, we are going to use this stock swing arm, but the guys at KX Guru modify this swing arm. They strengthen it up. They also make it so that we can put KX450 axle blocks in here, and a KX450 axle and a KX450 rear caliper. So we get the full brake here that'll go, and we'll still run our KX500 master cylinder, but with a KX450 brake pedal. And that's another thing that they're going to add to the frame, so that we can run the KX450 rear brake pedal. So with that, the seat, we're going to run the same seat, but we'll get it covered. And I think the foam is probably okay. We'll double check that. Of course, bars, we're going to have new bars. And when now we're talking about bars, we're going to have clamps made. Applied's going to make us triple clamps to fit the newer KX450 forks. We have some not air forks. But look at the magic of TV here. We got some 2011 KX450 forks, twin spring forks. Everybody loves these forks. And so we're going to run these forks, which we got a really good deal online, found these things for $300 and got a front brake setup so we can run the full brake setup. So we're going to make clamps to fit those forks and fit the newer front fender and number plate. So that's going to take care of kind of our modern look in the front of this bike with the newer, way oversized forks compared to these older forks that are, you know, however old that is, 30 years old. So that takes care of that. This subframe here, we're going to run this same subframe. You can see we got a bit of a rat's nest in here. We had a little animal living in here. This plastic is all still pretty good, but we're going to have all brand new UFO plastic. We already talked about the frame and everything we're going to do. The radiators, we're going to send these to ICW and have him strip them down, strengthen them up, maybe add some cooling capacity. I'm going to talk to him about that. Carburetor, we're not going to run this carburetor. We have a newer Kean that we're going to run, 38 Air Striker, I believe, which we'll report back to you in which carburetor, but we're switching carburetors to that. The tank, we're going to run that tank. We're going to clean that tank up, I think. If we find a better one, we'll look at that, but we're going to clean that tank up and plan on running that. So this front brake we won't use. The exhaust pipe will be getting an FMF exhaust, and the wheels, then we won't be running those wheels at all. We'll be running KX450 wheels from Faster, most likely, who will build us wheels to be KX450 wheels, front and rear, because the rear is going to take it because we're going to modify the swing arm, and the front's going to take it because of the forks. The other big thing then is the shock. Since this is a 91, apparently, and I'm learning all about this, this shock is a smaller reservoir body here than a 94 and newer. Takes like a 43, and this is like a 41, something like that. And so we have a larger 43 off of a 94 and newer coming that we're going to run. This thing did have an aftermarket silencer after all. That was one of the only other aftermarket pieces we found. Stock reed cage, still intact. We're going to run the V-Force on this thing, and here's our, we'll be running this stem when we press that out, and then we'll be running the stock dog linkage here. But on the dog bone pieces, we actually have some different ones from the KX Guru guys. So I think that's a good look at everything here that we're going to do. As you can see, it's a lot to do. So we're going to organize these parts, get this engine apart, and report back to you guys. Thanks for watching.